Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Scorn channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reading a chapter out of my Bigfoot Vol.1 Terror Tales book. And the chapter I'll be reading out of here today is called Night Stalkers by Jason Hughes. Now, I already went ahead and checked the pages. It is 7 pages long. So if I get to a point where I feel like I might have to stop, we might end up doing a two-parter. The full moon glistened over the snow-capped ground of Pennyworth, Pennsylvania. It was rather a small town, right outside of Pittsburgh. Most were nestled in for the night. Some couples sat outside and enjoyed the isolated and icy landscapes that stretched before their eyes. What do you think of those murders? The ones down the road? Valley Mare asked. She took another sip of coffee. Oh, yeah. The murders y'all keep bringing up to my relatives during supper. The ones that almost had him a barfing. What they scarfed. Those are the murders y'all squealing about again. Charlie Richmond blasted at her. He chugged the last of the tightly gripped random alcoholic beverage. Well, I'm just worried is all. It is a small, ifid town. You know, it could be someone we know even. Just as Charlie and Valley enjoyed the beautiful winter wonderland that was bestowed before their watery eyes, they despised each other's company as well. Football and hunting meant a lot to Charlie. That was about it. Valley's semi-joking and subliminal bashings were delivered more from the heart than it sometimes seemed. She meant every word coldly, but in the most warming, sarcastic tone. Well, you went ahead and blared out something about a dang human carcass while my parents were trying to ask you something important. It was about your schooling. You just cut them off while they were asking you where. Shh! Did you just hear that? Valley inquired as she removed her index finger from her mouth and twisted her head to both sides. I ain't hear nothing. You're hearing things. I'm ought to be. There it was again. Shut up for a second and you'll see. Here. Valley said as she jerked her wide-eyed head behind her. I'm getting kind of cold. Let's go in now. Valley said as she stood up and continued to look around in a silent tremble. Shoot, you could go in. I'm staying right here. It feels good out here. Well, if there's something lurking about that might grab you to kill you, you don't want to be out there. Charlie barked in a retaining manner. He spat once into the snow, wiped his mouth, paying no attention to Valley as she turned around and walked toward the house. Within the city limit of Bakersville, the Philemont family returned from the hospital with their handicapped son, Williford. They referred to him as Will for short. It was also easier for him to understand and comprehend that they were speaking to him. Will, it's almost time for your bed, Jill Philemont said as Gregory Philemont looked down in a shroud of descending emotion. He knew somewhere ahead that Will's time was short. He was wheelchair bound and barely mobile on 4 wheels. Gregory kept in the hopelessness buried deep within the shunned tombs of his aching heart. Bed, Williford asked in a non-gutturally charged daze of wonder. 6 more bodies were found in Rakersfield. Each of them seemed to be torn to pieces, ripped to shreds. Police have not found any leads to these grisly attacks, which seem to head toward Pittsburgh. One entire and once peaceful town is now covered in a blanket of fear. A killer is loose and wandering around in their neighborhood. I'm Brian Bakersfield, Channel 13, Eyewitness News. The reporter announced in a drowned tone of synthetic sympathy. Did you hear that, honey? Those killings. Oh, let me help Will to bed. I'll be back. We could talk about it then. That's scary to think of, Jill said, as she turned around and wheeled her wicked wheel away. Gregory looked at the two of them with a hollow sigh. Good night, Will, Gregory said with a wave and drizzling tear. Night, Will reply as he was gently reclined and rolled down the hall. Jill gave him a lift, tucked in and kissed before exiting the dark bedroom and closing the door. Williford began to drift into a horizontal trance. He could not move, but he was aware of what was going on around him. He could see clearly out of his windows and hear through the echoing and amplifying thin walls. The snow caked on the window on this particular night and usually season made the vision a blur. At the same time, Will's parents' voices carried throughout the half-empty house, loud and clear. He could hear Jill's muffled voice on several occasions. Sometimes the words would chill him to the bone. You could never do that, she would repeat, but no one would answer her back. Williford often wondered what she was saying and who she was talking to. The present conversation included Gregory's airborne, echoing whispers. They just found two more. It's showing it live on television. There's barely anything left of her. The reporter said that her body seemed masticated to almost nothing. They're broadcasting live, Gregory said as Jill re-entered the living room. Where did they find these? Jill asked in a flat-line tone of concern. They found her over by the woods, her clothing ripped to pieces, just as the flesh from her body and bones, Gregory replied. Don't say that, Craig. Well, I'm just saying, Gregory replied with a chuckle. I hate it when you say that, Jill said in a playful tone and sarcastic giggle. Just let me alone and deal with your own problems. Charlie wailed out the other side of the small town, barely introduced to the map. He had just about had it with Valley's verbal attacks of belittling sarcasm. I thought you were going to stay out in the effing cold weather for all you cared or something to that effect. Isn't that what you said, Charlie? Valley snapped as Charlie shut the fridge with a chilled one in his hand. Yeah, sometimes you almost force me to want to become whoever Channel 13 is talking about here. Can't let a man relax for the life of you, can you? Charlie said as he spat into the kitchen sink. Don't spit in the sink, Valley screamed in an uncontrollable strike of venom hissing anger. Oh, you just did something that women don't like seeing men doing. I spit in your face, girl, Charlie replied in a serious that almost repulsed Valley to no end. She would clench her fist and grind her teeth when she would hear Charlie use his biting tone. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot believe what we are hearing. 6 more bodies have popped up within the last few nights. The station has just reported one within the last hour. This is surely a sudden shock to the small town of Bakersfield. Authorities are baffled by the savagery and intensity of each faceless attack that has seemed to haunt this community. Doors and windows are being locked and bolted in what seemed to be a peaceful and tranquil place to reside. His savagery seems to have no age limit or traceable method of operation. We know that whatever he is using to chew up these helpless victims is one of many sharp objects. Axes or large knives are what some to believe are the murder weapons in this particular yet unfamiliar case. The bodies seem to be masticated or chewed in an overly savage manner and method. There are several lacerations to the flesh, and some of the victims seem to be scalped. This is the worst crime the area has seen in as long as the residents can recall. I just heard some rustling in the woods over there. I didn't think nothing of it. Woke up the next morning. My neighbor was sprawled out in the front of his hut, bleeding everywhere and stuff. My kid found him lying there. He was paid for, I tell you, paid for. Local interviewed resident Herman Maypalm said through a grainy picture and a fuzzy voice, each of which were transmitted by a coat hanger as a metal rod of makeshift bunny ears. Someone's out there, I'm telling you, Charlie. I'm effing scared. What if he's close to here? You wouldn't protect me? You don't care at all? Valley snarled as she stomped into her bedroom and slammed the door. In an instant violent rage, "Stay in there!" Charlie yelled, with his head straight forward. He continued to watch the news as the reporter continued to explain the body count unfolding practically in his own backyard. The number of the mutilated were mercilessly piling, inducing mind-shattering and contagious fear and dread among the frightened citizens. Something clattered outside of Charlie's window. He jumped up in a skillfully quick swivel and pivot. He was in a semi-blasted, drunken state of incoherence and blissful ignorance. Another crash clattered through the yard outside. Charlie slowly walked toward the door. A large, human-like silhouette passed the window. As Charlie half blindly made his way toward the front door, he slung it open with a bravely fueled jolt of energized adrenaline. "Who's out there?" Charlie screamed in anger-driven impatience. He scanned the front yard and wooded area across the street with his eyes. He could not see past the forest at an eye level. Right at the edge of the perimeter was a large hole embedded in the snow. He could hear the reporter in the background as his waving vision attempted to lock in on the pit in the frozen ground. "We are certain that the killer is armed and extremely dangerous. Do not leave your homes after dark, not even in groups. A town-wide curfew has been placed into effect as of now. The victims have been away from their respective homes at the times of every remorseless attack," the reporter repeated. The once grimly crimson glazed crime scene that was a few short blocks away had been recapped and coded in light sheets of freshly fallen snow. Charlie looked around and closed the door. A mammoth-sized, human-like shadow passed by the window behind him as he stumbled back to the couch and planted his dizzy shell back to a comfortably padded oblivion. His body started to shut down at a rapid pace. The huge human-like shadow stood at the window and watched Charlie as he dozed into a forceful, spinning slumber. The room would not sit still or stable round him. He could feel it in his head and stomach. The dark figure outside of the house was visibly breathing heavily and hunched down in a slight crouch. It raised its large right hand. "I'm afraid for Will. He's defenseless. What if he can't protect himself from someone like that? How could someone be such a monster?" "How?" Jill asked Gregory in a mental state of swirling paranoia. "We are going to protect him. You know we can. We were meant to meet and conceive Williford. He must, and we will protect him. He is our son, and you know that just as well as I do. We will protect him." Williford could not sleep. He overheard his mother and father's entire conversation. About 3 hours of listening slung by and eventually died away. Later that night, as someone savagely walked the streets, Will could hear Jill talking, but no one would respond to her. The subliminal tone in Jill's voice made her son's bones quiver worse than the cold weather seeping through the screen. Will could hear everything that happened outside as well. He heard movements. There were shadows outside of his window as well. He had never encountered outbursts of any kind. He was very intelligent for his unfortunately accidental outcome. It was not his fault. He understood that brutal fact. It is not my fault. Will would brutally say to himself every night as he lied down alone to eventually sleep. He repeated it to himself as many times as he could. When his mother would start talking with no response, it was the best he could do. I'm going to go ahead and start part two. So, hope you guys enjoyed part one, and I'll see you later.